Welcome to Luke21 Radio, a broadcast explaining biblical prophecy in the tradition of St. Augustine. And now, from Greenville, South Carolina, here's your host, Steve Wood.
Hello, this is Steve Wood, and welcome to Luke21, and we're in Revelation chapter 14, and today we're talking about the primary defense for resisting the Antichrist. The Antichrist is going to use persuasion and persecution, as we learned in Revelation 13, to get people to form an allegiance with him and take a mark of belief in him and worship a man who is not God, but worship him as God. So in Revelation 14, there are three end-time messages that are proclaimed from a messenger in the mid-heavens that are designed to safeguard Christians from giving allegiance or worship to the Antichrist. And today we're just going to focus on the first of those three end-time messages, because I think this first one, well, all three are very important, but I want to pull out this first one, and it's in Revelation 14:6, and it goes like this. The first angel, he said with a loud voice, "Fear God and give him glory, for the hour of his judgment has come, and worship him who made heaven and earth, the sea, and the fountains of water." This first message, brief, to the point, worship the Creator, is the trustworthy safeguard against you and your loved ones forming an eternal alliance with the Antichrist. Because if you sign up for allegiance with the Antichrist, it's eternal. It can't be undone. That's the next two messages we're going to see. So what is this bulwark that will keep you from basically falling for the Antichrist, either pressure or persuasion? And it's this: a firm, clear, and unshakable belief in a Creator. And that's your main safeguard against the allures and persecutions of the Antichrist. And here's what it is: your prime beliefs. Prime beliefs are those like, where did I come from? Who made everything that exists? That's one of the prime questions of a worldview, of a belief system, and those beliefs are translated into worship. And having that belief in the Creator and worshiping him as a Creator, that's why we as Catholics confess in the creation of everything by God himself as part of our liturgy. Now, there's an Exhibit A in the Old Testament of how this works, and it's from the second book of Maccabees. There's two books of Maccabees in the Old Testament, and the context of what's going on here is that a wicked ruler by the name of Antiochus Epiphanes is trying to get the Jews to defile themselves through like eating pig meat and all this type of thing, and denying their belief in God and worshiping Antiochus as a god. Antiochus Epiphanes here in Maccabees is the Bible's prime forerunner of the Antichrist. There's several types through the Old Testament and in history of types of pictures, so to speak, of what the Antichrist will be like. But the prime picture is this man right here, and how people in the Maccabean revolt and this family, this Jewish family that we're going to read about, it's a mother and her 7 sons. And this is around 167 to 164 BC. In our day, our Jewish friends still celebrate Hanukkah, which celebrates the Jewish victory over Antiochus Epiphanes that's recorded for us here in 2 Maccabees. So I'm going to take you right to the text, and I'm only going to do the first son and the 7th son, so you get a flavor for what was going on in this Jewish family. And Antiochus Epiphanes, I'll just give you an advance warning, is going to kill all 7 sons in the presence of this mother. And 2 Maccabees chapter 7 and verse 3, we read about the first of the 7 sons. The king, Antiochus, fell into a rage and gave orders that pans and cauldrons be heated. These were heated immediately, and he commanded that the tongue of their spokesman, that's his oldest son, be cut out, and that they scalp him and cut off his hands and feet, while the rest of the brothers and the mother looked on. When he was utterly helpless, the king ordered them to take him to the fire, still breathing, and to fry him in a pan. The smoke from the pan spread widely, but the brothers and their mother encouraged one another to die nobly. Woo! This is tough stuff. Very tough stuff. We go through, I just gave you, that was just the first son, and for sake of time, I'm not going through 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Imagine being the mother and watching this go on to your sons. And now we get to the youngest son, and Antiochus is trying to arm twist the mom. He's trying to get her, because, keep one son alive type of thing, encourage your son to cave to the threats of persecution by Antiochus. And so she pretends like she's telling him to cave, but then she speaks to him in Hebrew, which Antiochus didn't know. So here we go. 2 Maccabees chapter 7, verse 27. But leaning close to him, she spoke in their native tongue as follows, deriding the cruel tyrant. My son, have pity on me. I carried you 9 months in my womb and nursed you for 3 years and have reared you and brought you up to this point in your life and have taken care of you. And I beg you, my child, and this is what I want you to pay lots of attention to. I beg you, my child, to look at the heaven and the earth and see everything that is in them, and recognize that God did not make them out of things that existed. Thus also mankind comes into being. Do not fear this butcher, but prove worthy of your brothers. Accept death, so that in God's mercy I may get you back again with your brothers. Now, I'll just say this, and I say this truly in all charity. Protestants don't have 1st and 2nd Maccabees in their Bibles anymore. When I say anymore, I don't know if you're aware, when the King James Bible came out, 1st and 2nd Maccabees was in it. It was called the Apocrypha, but you would get a fine for publishing a King James Bible without Maccabees and the other deuterocanonical books, or what the Protestants call Apocrypha. But this is your Boy Scout handbook on how to resist the Antichrist. This is what Revelation 14:6 is describing. It's a firm belief in a creator, and out of that firm belief comes your worship of him as creator. And some of the most specific words in all the Bible about how the universe came into being was in the midst of her children being slaughtered by Antiochus Epiphanes, the forerunner of the Antichrist. And she says to him, and by the way, there's a firm relationship between a belief in God as creator of all things, including our bodies, and this is what the mother says here, and the belief in the resurrection. Some of the highest views of the resurrection of the body in the entire Old Testament is right here, and it's in the midst of the persecution. These are the things you need to resist somebody who's threatening to take your life. Otherwise, you're going to cave. And Catholics who ignore these books of the Maccabees, and Protestants don't have them in their Bibles, are left without the handbook for resisting the Antichrist. Listen to what she says. Look at heaven and the earth and see everything that's in them, and recognize God did not make them out of things that existed. Well, what about the Big Bang? The Big Bang is that chunk of matter that existed in the universe, and somehow there's a big explosion and evolution took over. One of my oldest son likes to debate, and he was in a community college class, and the professor was going on about the Big Bang, all the matter just exploded everywhere. And he raised his hand and said, Dr. So-and-so, where did that matter come from? And she said, well, we'll deal with that next semester, which I think he took her the second semester, and it wasn't brought up. Okay. She said, God did not make them out of things that existed. It was creation out of things that didn't exist. That is the power of God. And he says, and thus also mankind comes into being. And when you realize that everything you see and love and appreciate from the world, the glorious world that God has made, the rivers, the streams, the oceans, the mountains, nature, and our own bodies, he made everything, that we are then dependent on him. And it's the natural thing to worship him who's responsible for everything, every breath that we take. So she says the conclusion, based on that solid belief that God is creator, is going to give you a new, real body in the resurrection. And as I say, this is a very high point in the Old Testament, and it's not in a, quote, theological discussion. It's a discussion how to resist the Antichrist. And in God's mercy, I might get you back again. Now, millions of Protestant and Catholics are left defenseless by their teachers and leaders, teaching them theistic evolution, which I've told you before is an adjective tacked on to evolution. And young people, I'm very concerned with young people, and I call it the Matlock problem. Remember Andy Griffin was the attorney, and he had a Southern drawl, so his opponents in the courtroom would think he was a little stupid because he had a Southern drawl. Well, I'm just telling you, teachers and leaders assume that young people, like teenagers, because they're young, they haven't been through college programs and master's degrees and whatnot, are like Matlock. They're maybe not too clever upstairs. And so they just say there's no conflict whatsoever between theology and science. And they don't define what science is, because the given science is the evolution, or at least a little theistic evolution. And guess what? Young people don't buy it. They think it's a religious fairy tale. They'll sit there and look at you, make a face, but they'll leave the church. And according to the cold case detective who did real research into why young people are leaving the church, the most frequently cited reason for leaving the faith by young people for quitting Christianity, Protestant and Catholic, is evolution, is in conflict with what the Bible and the church teach. And they take evolution and leave. What's the solution? Modern science is really on the side of God here, because the DNA is such complicated code, so to speak, information, that not one molecule could be made given random chance mutations. It doesn't work scientifically and mathematically. We have a free handout on BibleForCatholics.com. Just look for Intelligent Design. You have a free handout with resources for children from preschool to young adults in a PhD program and everything in between. Just go to BibleForCatholics.com, look for Intelligent Design, teach your children so that if they happen to find tough times ahead, they know to depend on God as creator of heaven and earth. I'm Steve Wood, your host, and you've been listening to Biblical Prophecy with Luke 21.